What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in? I was looking at my mom's phone cause she wanted to show me some pictures from what she did that weekend. I swiped one too many times and came across one of her nudes. I felt my soul jolt out of my body seeing that shit. I was in some business college class and the professor was talking about something related to how celebrities brand themselves. Someone in the class brought up Shaun White as someone who had great celebrity branding, but isn't really talked about a lot. The professor was Indian and said he wasn't familiar with who that was. So my genius ass thought it would be perfect to say out loud I'm talking about Mountain Dew's baby, as a joke reference to that newscast where Shaun White said he had been drinking all night but was underage and the news person asked him what he meant. So he responded with I'm talking about Mountain Dew's baby. And no one seemed to knew about that, or at least didn't think it was funny, as silence rang through the classroom and professor awkwardly moved on to a new topic. Truly the most awkward situation I've been in, and also the worst haunting moment of my life. When I was a kid, we were on holiday and decided to go to a church. While we were there I decided that I would be funny if I would slap my dad's ass with both hands. So I ran in full speed to maximize the impact of the slap. I ended up slapping a stranger who also happened to walk next to a woman with a stroller in his hands, which made me think it was my dad. It was even worse that my parents saw it as well. Edit, because people are asking what happened afterwards. My parents just laughed at me, which made the guy laugh as well, and then we just left the church I think. When I was a kid my family's van broke down, so we all had to squeeze into my dad's car to go to a funeral. Anyways, my older sister had to sit on my lap. Yep, you guessed it. I got a boner and she freaked out and started screaming. I was at a funeral for one of my husband's relatives. On my way in, an employee of the funeral home asked me when I was due. I wasn't pregnant, but I'm fat and was wearing an Empire waistcoat, so I wasn't offended. As I signed the goose book I corrected her and tried to defuse the situation with a joke about burning that coat later. But she just wouldn't stop. She kept trying to apologize and explain herself, and I just wanted to run away. Then I was stuck in a small room with her for the next 2 hours. Not awkward for me, but I was the reason for it. I served for a couple years and worked multiple restaurants in that time frame. I worked at a Denny's, night shift, best and worst job for many reasons. Anyways, there was a regular that came in often, drunk as a skunk and nasty as hell. He tipped really well, but was so nasty to us girls. It never fazed me, so I served him often. He offered many times to pay for extra service and tried to get me to leave with him often. Of course I never did, but a couple months later in working a new place, little more high end, I work mornings here, and this was a Sunday morning church rush. Guess who was sat in my section? My nasty regular from my last job with his entire family. His wife, kids, parents, the whole group, fresh out at church. The look on this man's face when I walked up and said hello. He was red as a fire truck, and I made it worse by asking if he remembered me. He left me a huge tip, probably because I didn't bring up his nasty mouth and grabby hands from his late drunken nights. Edit, I was a waitress. That's what I meant by serving asterisk. I was a teenager with a boner. Pretty standard so far. I walked downstairs and had to tuck it in my pajamas, so the head is sticking straight up and the erection is pinned against the body, so the boner isn't noticeable. Well, when I put my t-shirt on it fell behind the tip, so if you looked at my wasit line you could clearly see the tip of my penis. I was talking to my mom for a few minutes and she was flushed red in the face and quickly trying to kill conversation, not something my mom is known for. I walked away, saw what was going on, and didn't know what the hell to do. We never discussed it, but because things were so awkward at dinner, I'm pretty sure my mom knew that I realized it happened as well. I hate that you feel the slightest bit embarrassed about that. Fuck those guys. That's unprofessional amateur nonsense. I know it's too late for you to do this now, so this is for the younger people who might find themselves in a situation like this. And I say this as a person who's worked in hours, interviewed countless people, called tons of references, done sourcing, onboarding, etc. This is not a good move for employers to do, and are often advised against looking social media. So, assuming your social media accounts aren't full of you joking about rape or racist, homophobic, sexist shit, I have 2 methods for you to consider. If you're more extroverted, you should look the person in the eyes, extend both of your middle fingers, tell them to stop being a creep, and then tell them to go fuck themselves. If you're more introverted, you should thank them for their time and the opportunity to discuss this position. In particular, you should tell them how thankful you were able to learn more about how this company regards the privacy of its employees. And then politely tell them to go fuck themselves. One time in college, I snuck into Myra's room and hid under the blanket on his top bunk. My goal was to scare him when he came in and settled down a bit. He ended up coming in with his girlfriend and began making out with her. After a good, lifetime, couple moments, I jumped up and ran out. No saving it. Edit. Gilded Platinum. Thank you so much internet friends. I've said it to a few of you, but it makes me legit happy that you have gotten a laugh and a smile out of my awkward story. This poor girl walked into my lecture by mistake about halfway through. This particular professor really enjoys talking to all of his students and was super engaging even with 400+ students in his class. When the girl walked in, my professor stopped teaching, looked at the girl, and asked if she was in the class. She said she was, and began walking towards the front, where the open seats were. This is a fairly large lecture hall and all 200 students, approximate how many actually show up to class, were now forced to watch this poor girl walk towards a seat, because the professor didn't continue talking, and just stared at her. She got close to the front and I think the pressure of the whole room got to her and she said, "Actually no I'm not," and turned around, and we all had to watch this poor girl climb back up the stairs and out of the hall. I was literally watching my worst nightmare. Most George Costanza moment of my life. I was flying back home from a business trip and gab. Before we all got on the airplane, everyone noticed that we would be flying with 3 military K9s and their handlers. All good. Point being everyone noticed them, and if they hadn't, the pilot was kind enough to point them out when he came over the intercom to give his spiel. A round of applause for our service members and their brave working dogs was given. Hours later in the flight crew had turned off the lights. I needed to take a piss and moved forward in the cabin toward the restrooms. Well, one of the dogs was black, and I didn't see his paw sticking into the aisle. Cue the dog yelping and crying. Have you ever had 150 people hate you before? It was made so much worse by the fact that I'm a veteran and I love dogs. I'm the son of a veteran who was a K9 handler when he served. But how the heck am I going to explain that to a plane load of people giving me the stink eye for being the asshole who stepped on the dog? George, it was a black dog. Jerry, and the lights were out. George, the lights were out. Jerry. Okay, I already posted in this thread, but I remembered something even worse. When I was in 2nd grade, my brother and I would always be picked up after school by my dad. We had a green van with a red stripe on the side. So my brother grabs my hand and storms us up to the car. He rips open the door, sits us down, buckles me in, and then says, "Can we get McDonald's on the way home?" We both look up and there is 2 middle-aged adults sitting in the front seat that are obviously not our family. They stare at us, we stare at them. In my little brain we've been staring at each other for at least 10 minutes at this point. My brother unbuckles me, unbuckles himself, we get out and walk away. No words were exchanged. We then checked who was in the car before getting in from that point forward. Edit. I've been on Reddit for 6 years and this is my highest comment by far. Thank you so much for the gold and silver. You're all so nice. I've loved hearing your similar stories. I'm going to ask my brother if he remembers this lol. My family's not super religious, but when I was about 13, they decided to go to synagogue on Purim for some reason. Part of Purim involves reading from the book of Esther, which has a part about Esther coming to see the king while he's sitting on his throne in the throne room, and when he sees her, he stands up and extends the golden scepter. When the rabbi got to that part, my 13-year-old brain pictured Esther coming to see the king while he's sitting on the shitter and burst out laughing. No one else laughed. Instead, everyone turned to stare at me, and I had to explain myself to an entire room of people. We now celebrate Purim in the comfort of my parents' home. I used to run a restaurant and had inherited an employee with a slew of mental health issues. She had massive anxiety issues and just couldn't handle the pressure of working in a restaurant. She'd break down and cry over simple mistakes if she felt she was making too many. It was extremely unfortunate, but I was terribly underprepared to coach someone like that. One day, during downtime, the cooks were shooting the shit and recounting stories of weird ex-coworkers. I opened up my yap and said, who was the one who kept crying every time they'd screw up? She was 2 feet away and literally responded with me.